Finally, I'm here with LaRon Singletary. Now, LaRon, as many people know, you're the former police chief of Rochester, New York. Now, tell me how you became the police chief of Rochester, New York.
I became the police chief, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I became the police chief I was appointed police chief after serving 20 years in the police department, working my way up through the ranks and serving this community. And the police chief is an appointed position by the mayor. So Mayor Warren, in April 2019, chose me to be the police chief of the city of Rochester. And it was a lifelong dream that I wanted to be a police officer. I started in the 5th grade. My DARE officer, Lucille Everett, wanted me, or she came into the classroom and taught us DARE. And for me, it was just more than the DARE program. It was establishing a relationship with law enforcement. And ever since then, I always wanted to be a police officer. My grandfather used to always say I used to sit on the couch with my feet dangling saying, I'm going to be a police officer one day when I grew up watching the TV show Cops. And sure enough, I was, and I just happened to be in a position to be appointed chief of police.
Now, March 2020, we sat down shortly before the chaos happened, right? Now, I'm not sure how much you can talk about Daniel Prude, right? But at that time when we sat down, everything seemed like a bright future for you here in Rochester. If you could change one thing about the actions that happened after Daniel Prude, what would that be?
Well, I tell you what, I did what I needed to do during that incident. I ordered internal investigations, criminal investigations, and we worked with the Attorney General's office, who ultimately presented the case to a grand jury. And the grand jury resulted in the officers being no-billed in the case, which means that there was no criminal action that the officers committed at the time, which kind of aligns with my preliminary assessment at that particular point in time. Now, I was not in the position as chief of police when the investigations continued on. I was removed from being police chief, so I had no control of the investigations. But leading up to the investigations, I did exactly what I needed to do with regard to ordering these investigations, the internal, the criminal, and contacting the district attorney's office.
Before the Daniel Prude, what was your relationship like with the mayor?
We had a great relationship. I have no ill will toward the mayor or anybody with regard to the situation. As I said earlier, am I disappointed about some of the things and decisions that were made on behalf of other people? Absolutely. But I have no ill will toward the mayor.
So I wrote an article for Minority Reporter, and I called you the sacrificial lamb. Now, I'm not sure if you ever read that article, but do you feel you were the sacrifice in order for Rochester to move forward after Daniel Prude?
Well, I think that's not for me to decide. That's for people to decide. I know that I did everything within my power that I believe to be the right thing, and based on my oath of office, based on the obligations that I had as police chief to ensure investigations were going to be complete. Certainly the internal, the criminal, and working with the AG's office, the Attorney General's office, and the district attorney's office throughout that. So I can't decide or know what other people were thinking during that particular point in time when they were making those decisions, but all I know is that I had to make decisions based on the law, based on policy and procedure, and based on what I had before me at that particular point in time.
Well, I remember our interview, and I keep going back to the interview, but I think about the time when you talked about your integrity, how important that was for you. And when you realized that was in question, how did that make you feel?
Well, I mean, integrity is the most important thing. That's all you have. Your character, your integrity, and when somebody tries to attack you, you have to fight for it. So that's exactly what I did, by following, litigation and seeking out attorneys. But for me, my job as police chief was to stick with the values and the way I was raised personally and professionally, and to go by a code of ethics that we had within the police department. And not just a code of ethics, but the law. And I had to make decisions based on that and policy and procedure. And for me, integrity means the most. So when your integrity becomes compromised, or people put you in situations where that may certainly happen, you have to do what's best for you.
Right. Now, you're at this point, you are running as a Republican, and you are going up against Joe Morelle.
Yes.
Now, that's a big deal.
It is, I mean, for me, the race is going to be about how LaRon Singletary can serve the constituents of the 25th Congressional District. Yes, there's going to be some differences and contrasts that Joe Morelle and I have, but, for me, it's about what LaRon Singletary can do for the people of the 25th Congressional District.
So how does that differ? How does your actions differ or your plan differ for Rochester than, let's say, Joe Morelle?
Well, I think for one thing, for LaRon Singletary is I have a desire to serve the people of this district and listen to some of the concerns that people have. Right now, people are dealing with a lot. They're dealing with massive inflation. They're dealing with gas prices. They're dealing with the cost of food going up. Many people are seeing that they're having to make tough decisions about putting food on their table. Many people wonder where the federal dollars are coming in and where they're going forward in this community. Many people want to know what's going on in D.C. We have some big things going on right now in Washington, D.C., and people wonder who's informing us, what's happening, where are the town halls. So I think one thing you have to be is you have to communicate with the people and the people that you serve. And I believe that I've served people for 20 years. I've worked on the street. I ran a multi-million-dollar organization. Almost 1,000 people within the RPD between sworn and civilian. So I think I have some transferable skills that will take me to the congressional level. And I believe if you know how to treat people, you know how to serve people, I think no matter what office you hold, that you will be successful in doing that.
Now you're running as a Republican. I keep saying that. How did that come about?
So it came about, I had a conversation with the Morelle County GOP chair of the Republican Party, and he talked to me about some of the values that he has for the party, wanting to talk to more in the community, urban community, about the values of the Republican Party. And for me, I've always been a conservative most of my life, particularly like most law enforcement officers are. And it was just having a conversation with Bernie, who said, I think you have a lot more to give to this community. And I agree with him. I always said that when I retired, I was going to move down south and go to a warmer climate, but I also believe God puts us in situations where he says that, I'm not done with you yet. And I believe God spoke to me. For a year, I was still. For a year, you have to, like God said, be still. You have to sit and sometimes reflect on some of the things that may have just happened. And then you think about, okay, there might be something greater for me that I could do here. And God said, I'm not done with it yet. So I listened. And when God has some, when he charts the path, I believe that no man can undo it. And so I said, okay, I'll think about it, thought about it, and came to the decision to actually run, because I believe that in this position, I have a greater opportunity to serve, a greater capacity to serve, and I think I can do a lot for people in this district that has not been done. So when you look at those things and look at the 20 years that I've given to this city, the 20 years that I've served as a police officer in this city, I love serving people. I love the country. I love leaving people in a better position than when I first encountered them. And I think by running for Congress, I can do that.
Rochester is a Democratic city, right?
Yes. Rochester is a Democratic city, but I think what you have to do is you have to look at the entire district. Yes, the district is within the city of Rochester, but for me, like I said, I have been conservative pretty much most of my life, and I think what I wanted to do by running is give people another choice. There are situations that I believe that sometimes the Democratic Party has fallen short, particularly when it comes to people of color. You mentioned the urban environment, but I believe that the Democratic Party sometimes fails people of color. I'm not saying the Republican Party is perfect. I think both parties had their flaws, but for me, one of the reasons why I switched to the Republican Party is because they align more with my values. And I believe that we live in such a great country that we can now choose to go with a different party if we believe one party is not aligning with our values. And that's exactly what I chose to do. When it comes to public safety, I'm not for defunding the police. When I was police chief, I was in front of the camera all the time. I said, if you defund the police,
or continue with this rhetoric, it will impact black and brown communities. And look what's happened over the last year. We have homicide. We have 79 homicides in the city of Rochester, and I think for a great portion of the summer, many people, many leaders, many politicians did not even say nothing about it. So that was one of the things that sparked me to run as well, because when you put politics over people, that just should never fly. That's unacceptable. And so you have to be able to bring people together and use the positions that you hold in the community and make sure that people know that you're accessible. Make sure that people know that you're talking about the issues. So when it comes to defunding the police, you can't demonize, demoralize, and defund the police and then turn around and ask for better police. That's just not going to happen. So it's just one of those things that we're seeing across the country, and some of the policies that have been put in place in New York State. And New York State has been run by the Democratic Party for quite some time. And so I believe when you talk about less is more, when you talk about Cassius bail, I think we understand that there was good intent behind those laws, but we can't allow the good intent to outweigh some of the unintended consequences that we're seeing as a result of these policies being put in place.
Now, because you left in such a controversial way, have you reached out to any of the activists or, the people who were very active in calling for your resignation? Have you sat down with any of them? And if not, would you be interested in doing something like that?
As chief of police, as Ron Singletary, not outside of chief of police, I've always been willing to sit down with anybody, because I believe that in order to understand where we're coming from, we have to be to sit down and have a conversation. My door is always open when I was chief of police. And as going into this congressional race, my door will always be open for people who want to have a conversation. What's important about elected officials is that they represent everyone. They don't have the luxury of picking and choosing, and nor should it be a luxury, because you have to represent everyone within your district, and you have to listen to everyone. You may not always agree, but maybe there's some common ground that you can kind of find. But I'm always willing to sit down. I have sat down with some people. I have seen people in passing, and it's been a very good conversation. Not a death conversation, but hi and bye and how you doing, so yeah, I'm always willing to sit down with anybody.
So about this community now, you see the violence, you see all of this. Is LaRon better suited for this congressional seat versus being in as police chief? What do you think? They're looking for someone, I guess, to be police chief. When you think about that, what do you think? Where are you best suited?
Well, I tell you what, I think it's for the good Lord to decide, and I think the good Lord puts us in places where He believes is best for us. Look, people wanted me to run for mayor of the city of Rochester, and I just, that wasn't the time and place for me to do that right then and there, because obviously I had litigation against the city of Rochester. So to serve in a role as mayor, that wouldn't be, I think, conducive for that position. But there was a lot of support that I had garnered, that people wanted me to run for mayor, but that just wasn't the case, and it wasn't the time for me. Here I have a position where I can serve at a higher level and hopefully make an impact. If the voters in November of next year will vote me into office to serve them the best way that I know how. That's what I've been doing for most of my life, is serving people. So I believe, like I said earlier, if you know how to serve people, I think you would do well in life. And people just want to be heard. People want to know and understand that there is somebody out there listening to them, somebody out there that is willing to advocate for them on their behalf. And when I was chief of police, I think I did those things. People had my phone number. People called me when they had issues and let me know what was going on in their neighborhood, and I was responsive to that. I was always visible and accessible out in the community, and I think that's what people want. So I think people will see how I serve as chief of police, although in a different role. It's still serving people, no matter what how you look at it. And I think people will look at my previous experience, and hopefully I had enough credit in the bank where people will say, you know what, let's give him a chance. Let's give him an opportunity to see if he can serve in this role.
Now, there were rumors out or whatever about you were moving to Texas to become a chief there. What are the rumors and what are facts?
So I did apply for numerous positions around the country, but unfortunately I did not land an interview. I did not land with that particular job. I applied for a number of positions throughout the country, but I didn't get an interview or a job. I did receive 2 interviews, but didn't land a job. Those are facts with regard to, I did apply for a number of positions. When I left here as police chief, I was not looking to leave police chief of the hometown that I grew up in, or look for work elsewhere. But the circumstances happened as they were, and I was looking for work.
Now, do you think Lovely Warren is basically, did Lovely Warren tarnish your image, your legacy?
Well, I tell you what, I think that's for people to decide. Certainly, I filed litigation. That's public, notice of claim, and actually filed a lawsuit with that. But I think that's for people to decide.
Now, if you had a chance to speak with her, what would you say?
I'm not sure.
What keeps you moving? What keeps you going?
So what keeps me moving, what keeps me going is my faith in God, obviously. And I have a lot of close family and friends who have been with me, and a lot of people who I admire and respect in this community, who I've turned to for sound advice, because I believe we're never alone. We can't do it alone. And that there are people in higher positions, including God, who guides us along this path. And so, the last 18 months or so, or a year or so, has been through a storm. But I believe sometimes we have to go through things to, come out better on the other side. I've always had faith. I've always believed. But I also believe that God removed me from a situation that was about to get a lot worse. When you talk about crime, when you talk about some of the things that we've seen in our city in the last several months. So I think that for me, it was an opportunity to sit and be still and reflect. And like I said, I could have possibly moved down south into a warmer climate after my plans were to once I retired. But I believe that the good Lord said, I still have more work for you to do here at home. And so I'm going to take this opportunity and relish in the opportunity, and hopefully the voters will vote me as the next congressional leader here in the 25th District of New York.
Now, you mentioned your lawsuit against the city. Can you talk about that? What's happening with that?
Well, the lawyers are working with the city on that, and so we'll see where it goes. But yeah, you're right. I did file a lawsuit with the city of Rochester, which is a notice of claim, which is public information. So we'll see where it goes. And the lawyers are working with the city on that.
Now, you filed against the city, and you also added Lovely Warren. Since she's no longer the mayor, how does that work?
Well, I think that's where the lawyers would have to figure it out.
Okay, so you can't explain if you're going after her personally.
Well, the lawyer, I think lawyers are better suited than I.
Okay.
Let's see how that's going to work out.
So when you decided to file the lawsuit, what did you think? Like when you decided that, listen, my integrity is on the line, I'm going to file a lawsuit against the very city that you love. How difficult was that?
Well, I'd say it comes down to what I said earlier about your integrity. You have one name, and when you have to fight for that name if you believe that you are right. You should fight for anything if you believe you're right. So I believe that that's what I needed to do, which is file a lawsuit and defend my name and defend my reputation. There are people in this city who know they're on Singletary, and there are people in this city who saw through the smoke as to what was occurring in the city of Rochester during that time. And I believe that the people in this city are smart. The people in this city are intelligent. Like I said, they saw through the smoke. As my travels throughout this city and throughout this area in the last year, several months, people have stopped me in the grocery store, say, "Hey, how you doing?" And they give me their opinion as to what they felt about what happened to me in the city of Rochester. And I know there are going to be people who feel on both sides of the circumstance, and I get it. People are entitled to their opinion. But one thing I do know for sure is that I did everything that I needed to do with respect to being chief of police regarding this incident. The Attorney General's office did an investigation. She presented it to a grand jury. She released the results of that grand jury, and the final decision from the grand jury was to no bill the officers with respect to any criminal violations that the officers did. So that was kind of aligned with my preliminary assessment of the incident.
Now, there was an external investigation. regarding the cover-up of Daniel Prude's killing, I have to say. The investigator determined that there was cover-up, and a cover-up on you and the mayor's part, right? What did you think about that investigation?
Well, I disagree with, the term of cover-up, because if there was a cover-up, I would have been charged with some sort of crime. That's crime. A cover-up is crime, technically. So I would have been charged with some sort of obstruction of justice or anything, something of that nature.
Right.
We're talking about a cover-up. So there was no charges against me. The Attorney General did her investigation, and we saw the result of that investigation. So, the City Council investigation was done by an attorney who was, provided by City Council. And, I think he tried to do the best that he could. But I think the term, the word cover-up, I think is just a term that's just not true.
My issue with it was that if there wasn't a crime, then how could it still be a cover-up? Isn't that like, I kept asking that after the AG determined there wasn't a crime, how could you all still be under investigation for a cover-up? You don't have to report a death if he died from drugs, is what they're saying, right? Isn't that?
Well, I think the Attorney General's final conclusion of the investigation was made public.
Mm-hmm.
She even went so much as to release the findings of the grand jury investigation, which is not really done here in New York. And so I think the Attorney General was very transparent in her investigation. So I think people just need to go through and read what the Attorney General did. It's hard for me to go into what people thought or what people tried to put an angle toward whatever conclusion that they wanted to provide. But for me, the Attorney General results align with my preliminary assessment of the investigation. Now, I was removed prior to the investigations being completed. So
Right. And during that investigation, you actually did your interview publicly.
yes,
Now, do you regret doing that interview publicly?
no.
So I think that what we learned from that interview was more of LaRon is a police officer. I think that because you didn't see anything wrong with the Daniel Prude, you thought it was standard. And I think for people who are on the outside, just citizens, we couldn't connect with that. Like, to most of us, we thought like, oh my God, we just watched somebody get murdered. And you and the police department felt that this was standard procedure. How do, as citizens, how do we look at these videos and think that this is murder and you all think that this is standard procedure? How do we get on the same page for that?
Well, I wouldn't say I thought it was standard procedure, because I'd never had an opportunity to make a final decision as to what the ruling was or what the internal investigation was or the results of the criminal investigation, which was not my responsibility for the criminal investigation. The internal would have been my responsibility, but I was removed prior to that, so I never came to a final conclusion. So I had a preliminary assessment as to what I knew about the information I knew at the time, that I did not have any evidence that the officer committed any criminal activity during that particular point in time. So I was never able to come to a conclusion about anything because I was removed prior to the internal investigation being completed.
Oh, it's not clear.
Yeah.
Okay. so that's why. So you were basically saying from the beginning, you had to assess it, and you didn't have a chance to.
So I had a preliminary assessment, and then basically had to make a decision based on the preliminary assessment. And it wasn't a final decision; it was just a preliminary assessment. But there was enough for me to order a criminal investigation and an internal investigation.
Okay. Now, what do you think? So, what do you think about you guys, Mayor Lovely Warren, the Chief of Police, you, LaRon Singletary, being crucified, but the 4 police officers are barely mentioned? Like, I think that for me, that was difficult to see you all become the target when you weren't there at the scene of Daniel Prude, and the police officers were rarely mentioned.
Well, for me, it's like I said, I can't decide what people think or what people have an opinion on. I can only account for my actions and what I thought was appropriate at that particular point in time. But I can't account for what people views on or opinions or comments on it, so I don't know.
So what would you like the public to know about LaRon Singletary?
Well, I'd like the public to know that LaRon Singletary has served his community for 20 years, that I'm a person of integrity. I'm a person who, has to apply, policies and procedures fairly. As a police chief, you can't play politics. You have to make decisions based on the law. You have to make decisions based on policy, and you just can't play politics as a police chief. And that's one of the things that I, will always, moving forward, do. You have to be transparent. You have to be, you have to communicate with the public on certain issues and certain things. But one thing for sure is that I did my job as police chief during that time. But I'm a person of integrity, a person who believes in values. And I think most people in this community, a greater portion of people in this community know me and know LaRon Singletary.
So I do want to say, I remember one of the final news conferences you and Lovely Warren did together. And I remember them asking you, the mayor is saying that you didn't tell her. And you looked up and you were like, that's what she said. But we know what that means in the Black community. Like, yeah, that's what she said. Like, that's a lie, right? And when I think about that, you could see the breakdown of your relationship in that one of the final news conferences. If you could just go back and think about a way to kind of mend that relationship, is there anything you think you could have done to kind of change the direction this whole thing went?
No, again, I can only account for the actions that I took at that particular point in time, and based on what I knew was a policy and procedure, and based on the laws at that particular point in time. So, no, I mean, I can't speak for other people's actions and why people made decisions for what they did. When it comes to the officers, my job as police chief is to make sure that there was no policy violation or no evident criminal activity that occurred right there immediately. And obviously, that's why we have investigations, because we have to let the investigations play out, both internally and criminal investigation.
Now, is there anything you've been doing that's fun? What is fun? Like, this has been all,
Yeah,
we're talking
I
about.
have been traveling a little bit,
Okay.
just hanging out with family and friends, so I've been doing that.
Okay, have you danced and, did anything? Because I want to see, like, I remember one time in the press conference, in the news conference, I was like, LaRon seems like he's ready to curse, right? I was like, he's ready to curse. I want to see that side. Like, have you been able to break out and do anything outside of the norm that, you're used to being?
Yeah, I mean, well, during the height of this, obviously we had the pandemic going on, so some things were closed, and we were just coming out of the pandemic, or not coming out of the pandemic, we're still in the pandemic, but coming out of the lockdown, I would say. So there wasn't a lot that we could do, but I did travel a little bit, not as much as probably I would have had we not been in the pandemic. But, I mean, like I said, one thing for me is that, I've never been a person that needs to have anything outside to do to make myself happy or, excited or anything like that. But, just reflection. 20 years is a long time in public service. And, when you've given yourself so much to, the community, and you work long hours, and, even from when I was a patrol officer all the way to chief of police, you just work long hours. So it's like almost like being married to the job.
Yes.
So, you just have to have that balance. But for me, I would say there probably was not a lot of balance in my life during that time as police chief. Yeah, or police chief, or even, previous ranks. But I think, when you have a desire to do something, you still have a passion to serve and serve people, you care about people, I think that's an opportunity to move forward.
One last question. People have had issues with you running as a Republican. I even heard things like, oh, he's a sellout, right? What do you say to those people? Don't give me something politically correct. Say something like, I want to...
Well, I think what you got to do is you got to be able to listen to both sides. I mean, if you look at some of the things that some of the policies have been put in place by the Democratic Party, you got to think like, okay, what better are you today?
always say
You
that.
know, what better are you today than, you know, try something different, try something new, and that's what makes our country so great. People can choose not to choose to look at another party, and some people may be on the fence on certain issues. Some people may choose to say, okay, I'm not a Republican, but I do believe in some of the values of the Republican Party, but I'm not ready to jump to the Republican Party. And I think we have a lot of people in our community who may vote Republican, who may be Democrat. A lot of people in our community who may vote Republican, who are Republican, who may vote Democrat. So that's just what makes our country so great, that we live in a place where people can have the right to choose the political parties, affiliations. But for me, what I would say is have a conversation. Let's have a conversation. Be open to something new. You know, I think a lot of times within the Black community, many people are Democrat because that's what our parents and grandparents have been for quite some time, and we tend to follow suit. But you know, there are certain things that happen in our history of the country that, for me, was saying I just can't agree with this part of the Democratic Party anymore. There was a saying that, you know, the Democratic Party, I didn't leave the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party left me. So when you talk about defunding the police and some of the views, you know, some of the family issues, and it's just, for me, the Republican Party more so aligned with some of the conservative values I have.
Can we throw a party for you? Like, I want to see LaRon and some jeans and dancing. I want, like, listen, I need to see LaRon, like, outside of it, because I know I see it in you. I see it.
I like the party. I like to have a good time. I like to have a good time.
Yeah, so again, I want to thank you for speaking with me. It's always a pleasure. I'm excited to see you run. I would love to like set up something to get different people involved just to hear what you have to say, because I think that, like, I'm an independent, so I'm like right there.
Right.
So I can vote either way, and I think there's a lot of people like me just waiting for the right
and I've heard that, and I've received a lot of support in the community from people saying, no, you know, you got me thinking about, you know, the other side. You got me thinking about what the party who I'm aligned with is doing right now and what's going on right now in the country. So I said, no matter if I win or lose, if I could get people to pay attention to the issues or get people to just not be married to one particular thing and have an open ideas to, you know, some another thing that may be better or that may be in your best interest. You know, because I think when we sit down and have a conversation, we may find out that we're not further aligned than we may be closer together. Because, you know, I want safe neighborhoods.
Right.
I want a quality education for children. I want, you know, people to have good paying jobs. You know, so I think those are a lot of the same things that people want in this district. You know, whether you're Democrat, Republican, or Independent. So I think there's a lot of conversation to be had over the next year. And like I said, I think when people sit down and have a conversation, I'm not too far off from what they want as well. You know, they want safe neighborhoods. They want good policing.
Right.
They want certain freedoms to not be encroached upon by the government. So, you know, and that's what I'm about. I want to stick up for those people who feel the same way. And then those people who feel another way, hey, you know what? Sit me down, have a conversation. You may be able to convince me, you know, one way or the other. You know, but there are certain values that I have that I'm not going to, you know, I guess move on. But one thing as a representative is that I have to be open and I have to listen to people, and you know, we have to be able to engage in a dialogue that, you know, that can open the door to thinking outside the box.
Okay.
You know?
All right, I think that's all. I think I got everything.